Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my rant on the 2007 comedy Norbit. Now, I honestly think the tagline for this film sums it up. What if you made one really big mistake? Yeah, you're definitely making a mistake, and a big one if you decide to sit through this film. Because Norbit is one big fat piece of shit. I knew that I was in trouble going into this one because of this film's infamous reputation for being not only Eddie Murphy's worst film, but one of the worst comedies ever made. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it's one of the worst comedies I've ever seen in my entire life. I think there's other comedies that are worse than this because there were some side characters and some moments that made me chuckle. Unlike some movies that I've seen where I haven't even laughed like one time throughout the entire runtime, but this is definitely the lowest point and the worst film that Eddie Murphy has ever done in his filmography. Uh, I can definitely buy the rumors that this is what cost him the Oscar for Dreamgirls. The Academy was like, "You don't deserve an Oscar, Eddie Murphy, for starring in Norbit." But before I go any further, sharing my thoughts on this big fat fail of a comedy, I would like to give a special shout out to Brian for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Norbit is directed by Brian Robbins. And Brian Robbins is a guy who I think he's an all right filmmaker. I mean, he's done some good stuff, like he did Varsity Blues, which I felt actually featured some pretty solid direction. He also uh, worked on All That for Nickelodeon. In fact, I think he was one of the producers of that series. He also directed Good Burger. He did a few other things that you might recognize in terms of his filmography. And this is, I would say, a film when it comes to the direction that is on par with any other movie from around this time period in the comedy genre. The direction, it's lively enough. It's definitely got some energy to it. It's not completely lifeless and flat or flaccid. It's at points a little bit too energetic though, to the point where it's almost like you're watching the Fat Albert movie. Um, and I don't know if that cartoonish energy really necessarily worked for a lot of the gags and a lot of the comedic moments that the film had. But you know, the moments that are supposed to be sweet, they're sweet. The moments that are actually supposed to showcase some decent settings or set pieces, they're structured decently enough. The structure is okay. The framing is also adequate. It's just one of those things where you get a lot of run of the mill, so kind of work and effort when it comes to the direction. But there are some moments where it's below that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the physical comedy scenes. Because a lot of the direction is either too amped up or it's too telegraphed. Like it's just not doing a good job in terms of really preserving and maintaining the proper comic timing for the physical comedy bits. It's either showing the audience what's going to happen next in very clear fashion and essentially ruining the upcoming punchline, or it's not doing that, but once the physical comedy happens, the direction is a bit too over the top and a bit too overblown. It's not that it's too bloated or anything. That could have been an issue in itself. It's just one of those things where it just winds up being very inconsistent when it comes to its comic timing. And when you are doing a lot of physical comedy, you really need that comic timing. Otherwise, it either comes across as just a bunch of random nonsense or it's just not funny. And there's a lot of that when it comes to the physical comedy scenes in Norbit. But as unimpressive, as uninspired as the direction by Robbins at points can be, it's nothing compared to this screenplay by Eddie Murphy and Charles Murphy. This screenplay sucks. This is a script that definitely does suck a big fat taint. This is a terrible script. Uh, it, it in itself is another giant mistake. It's honestly one big fat giant mistake after another because of the fact that it's just continually bad. The concept itself is not a good idea. Okay, let's make a comedy about a shy, reserved man who is in an abusive relationship. I don't know what's really that funny about that. But apparently, Eddie thought it was the funniest shit ever because he came up with the idea for this movie based on the fact that he was watching a lot of these home movies featuring black men being abused by their fatter or larger wives. And I'm like, what? Where's the comedy in this? This is just sad and hard to watch. And any attempts to try to make some comedy out of it is just lazy fat jokes or lazy racist caricatures or just lazy comedy in general, fart jokes, random nonsense like Norbit liking turkey ass for some reason, and random characters that pop in and have a cameo that feel like they're from a different movie or uh some kind of new character that you could see in like Mad TV or SNL. And that's the other thing. This whole plot is only something that can barely work for the plot of a single skit on a sketch comedy show. It's not a plot that's actually going to be able to sustain itself for an hour and 40 something minutes. It's not interesting enough and it's also way too predictable. And it doesn't really feature that many likable characters. Yeah, there's a couple people you kind of don't mind, like the two ex pimps that honestly I wish that they were starring in their own movie. Pope Sweet Jesus, Lord Have Mercy, or some of Respucia's brothers, like Big Black Jack, played by Terry Crews. But other than those characters, like Norbit isn't that likable because he's too pathetic. Respucia is not likable at all, and she's not that interesting of a character either. She's very one note. There's not really a lot of meat on her bones, despite the fact that she's quite a massive person. Despite how fat she is, surprisingly enough, that character is very thin. And Norbit is just your stereotypical, oh, shy, nerdy guy. There's not really a lot different from Norbit in like his character in Bowfinger, but his character in Bowfinger was a lot more likable and didn't have an annoying voice. And you have this attempt at trying to have a romance, but it's very predictable and trite and just been there, done that kind of stuff. Oh, it's a childhood love that he had when he was living in the orphanage, and then she wound up going away and got adopted by somebody else, and now he's stuck with this fat bitch of a wife in Rasputia. But his childhood flame is now back into his life. But oh no, she's gonna be marrying this other guy instead, and Dion, who happens to be a gold digger. And it's up to Norbit to try to reveal the truth and stop her from making a mistake and marrying this guy. And of course, there's ulterior motives with Big Black Jack, and they're working with Dion Hughes to try to trick Kate into signing these papers so they can sign over the orphanage to them so they can make a strip club. And so you have Norbit being involved, and he unwillingly helps them, and that causes a falling out between him and his love of his life. And there's even a whole bit where he has to tell her that he doesn't love her because Rasputia saw him one night practicing the wedding, which is weird in itself, but he saw him doing that with Kate. And so then she is threatening to essentially hurt him and hurt her if he ever sees her again. So he has to exaggerate things when it comes to how much he doesn't like her and how he actually did trick her. And you're like, come on now. And it's just one of those things where you're like, okay, get to the end. Let's just end this shit and get it over with them getting married at the end, and Rasputia and the villains getting their comeuppance. And even that isn't really that satisfying. What, Rasputia gets a harpoon thrown into her ass and then runs like she's got super speed, like she's Quicksilver? Like, what is so satisfying about that? Oh, and Big Black Jack and the other guys just get chased by the townspeople and you never see them actually get their asses kicked? Oh, they wind up in Mexico and they have their bar Nippolopolis over there, but it's a failure? Okay, alright. But then again, now I have to see the image of Rasputia stripping, which is an image nobody wants to fucking see. So there's really not a whole lot about it that is satisfying when it comes to the structure or the payoff when it comes to the comedy. Like I said, the characters, they're not great. Mr. Wong isn't really that much better either. They're trying to make him into like a kind-hearted character who means well, but he's racist and he's just really questionable when it comes to a lot of other aspects of his character. And that's not even counting the fact that Eddie Murphy is playing the character in what amounts to yellowface, really, because he's playing the character in makeup and playing an Asian man. Complete with the stereotypical Asian accent and everything. And there's just so much about this script that is just absolutely terrible. It really is. There's not enough there for a feature film in terms of a story because you're like, okay, why should I give a shit? Why should I care about Norbit finding his true love? Why should I care about what happens to Rasputia and her family? I know they try to hold the orphanage. Like, that's also one of the oldest tricks in the book. They got to save the orphanage? Really? How lazy can you get? And there really aren't moments where they kind of like point out how, they're satirizing these tropes or anything. So it's not like you get anything like that. And like I said, the majority of the comedy is just fat jokes or multiple instances where Rasputia is just a mean bitch. Like, the fat jokes are the typical sort of stuff. Oh, she's so fat she can barely even get into her car. And every time she leans over, her titty hits a car horn. There are entire scenes where she's so big and fat that she's destroying things. Like she's Godzilla because she's so fat. Or there's a scene where she squeezes into a bouncy house and is trying to get her hat away from these kids. And every time she jumps on the bouncy house, the kids fly in the air like 10 feet. There's the whole water slide bit where she goes down the water slide and then flies off and then smashes through a wall and then lands in the kiddie pool and sends all the water flying out of the pool because, get it? She's fat. Do you have anything else, Eddie? Do you have anything else, Charlie? And on that note, I'm glad that the two of them really didn't collaborate that much after this, because every time that they collaborated as writers, it's been bad. It's been disappointing because the previous time they collaborated together was on Vampire in Brooklyn, which also sucked. So I want to see the positives here. I want to see elements and things about this script that are good, that work. And the only things that kind of work, I think, are just stuff that's not even in the script. I think Eddie Griffin and Katt Williams, they probably just improvised all of their stuff. That wasn't even in the screenplay. Same thing goes for some of the stuff from Terry Crews. It's just such a weak screenplay with a weak story, with weak comedy that's lazy and unbelievably uninspired. In a lot of ways, it's something that is just skin and bones, and then the writers are just throwing some fat on it and trying to act like it's got some meat to it, but it's nothing but fat. There's nothing substantial to it. And it's just gross and it's misshapen and it's ugly and it's hard to look at and it's hard to honestly sit through, let alone enjoy. And I swear to all that is fucking holy, if I hear the catchphrase, "How you doing?" one more goddamn time, I'm going to flip my fucking shit. Because I swear Eddie Murphy said that particular line 50 fucking times throughout this movie. And I honestly feel half this script is just, "How you doing? How you doing? How you doing?" Over and over and over and over and over and over again, with some sprinklings of turkey ass and farts. It's not funny for the most part. It's not engaging, it's not interesting, it's not creative, unless you think a whole scene where there's 4 scenes one after another of the same gag happening over and over again, which involves Norbit having sex with his fat wife who just jumps on him in bed and the bed collapses and he winces in pain, as creativity and instances of inspired writing. You don't get jack shit when it comes to quality writing or interesting bits of comedy or much comedy, period, because it doesn't make you laugh. It just makes you cringe. 9 times out of fucking 10. I'm sorry, I don't find lines like this to be peak comedy. "Well, ho! Did somebody just call me a whale? Yeah, and the ho!" Yeah, that is one terrible screenplay. Uh, I honestly feel it might be arguably the worst script that Eddie Murphy has ever written. And that's saying a lot since he also co wrote Vampire in Brooklyn. Now, the cast, I mean, you got Eddie Murphy playing multiple characters again. He's playing Norbit, he's playing Rasputia, he's also playing Mr. Wong. All 3 of these characters are 3 of the weakest and worst characters he's ever played in any of his movies and in honestly anything that Eddie has ever been a part of. And that includes stuff like his animated or shows or like some of the other like TV stuff that he's done. Um Even like the weakest character in the PJs is 10 times better than any of these characters. Norbit comes across like a really lesser version of the same character he played in Bowfinger, but nowhere near as likable, despite the attempts to try to make him into a likable character, because he's just boring, or the way that he has him talk is just annoying. Like what was Eddie thinking with him talking like this and doing his whole face and being like, Respucia, oh, you can't have a wine cooler because you're a child. Like what was up with that? Like why did he think that that was funny? It's just not. It's just really not really that great of a character. It's not funny to watch him strain his face like that and barely get lines out because he has to do this stupid voice. And Respucia is not much better at all. Uh, Honestly, Respucia is probably worse. There's nothing to really find to be that funny about the character, other than the fact that it's Eddie Murphy in another fat suit. Mr. Wong's another instance. Oh, it's funny because it's Eddie Murphy in makeup again, but this time he's playing an Asian man. So yeah, all three of these characters sucked, if you ask me. And Eddie's performance when it comes to playing all three of them is not really up there with some of his best work or his best efforts. Uh, Thandiwe Newton, she's all right as the love interest. Pretty thankless role, but she does the best that she can, and she does a good job conveying a sweet character. Terry Crews, I had fun with him as a big black Jack. Same thing goes for like Lester Spade as Blue and Clifton Powell as Earl. Uh, the henchman of Respucia. Cuba Gooding Jr. as Dion. Just I mean, I don't mind him as an actor, but this was just easily one of his most forgettable performances as this sweet talking gold digger. Um, Eddie Griffin and Katt Williams, I had fun with their characters. They definitely brought it. They they delivered. They're like one of the few cast members in this other than like Terry Crews and some of the other people that actually delivered some quality work. Uh but they definitely didn't save the movie. Marlon Wayans as Buster at points was a little much, but I appreciated his attempts to try to inject some serious somewhat unique comedy into the film that wasn't just stale fat jokes and stuff like that. But really, like, it's not really that much of a cast. I mean, you have Eddie playing these three different characters, and you have Thandie Newton and like Terry Crews and Eddie Griffin and Katt Williams. So there's not really a lot of variety when it comes to the cast because so much of the movie is taken up by Eddie Murphy playing all these different characters. And it's something that works fine in a other film, like in a different kind of movie where like Coming to America, where he's playing different sort of characters, like the barbershop characters and so on and so forth. But that works because it's in small doses and they're just side characters and they're cameos essentially. This is like if you have those performances and those type of characters and they're in the forefront. And it's not really something that I think is to the benefit of the cast overall or to the film. And then you also have, some cinematography by Clark Mathis and editing by Ned Bastille. Both of those things are really not anything that's really worth mentioning because it's not really like there's a lot going on with the cinematography. It's very typical. It's very bland and just not really anything that special in terms of the way that it looks. The editing by Ned Bastille, it's not really anything other than average at best and then below average at worst because there are some moments where there's some choppy edits. And the music by David Newman's definitely one of his most forgettable scores. Talking about forgettable, I don't even remember a single note from this score. And you have makeup effects by Rick Baker that won the Oscar, by the way. Yeah, Rick Baker won the Oscar for Best Makeup Effects for An American Werewolf in London, but also won the Oscar for Best Makeup Effects for Norbit. The makeup's not bad. I think for the most part, it looks pretty good. But, like, I don't think it's Oscar worthy. But that's just me personally. And it's 102 minutes, and that's way too long. There was no reason for this to be an hour and 40 something minutes. It really does lead to it, honestly, carrying way too much weight that it can barely even handle by the end of the runtime. And it's just one of those movies where, yeah, I understand the premise. Yeah, I get what they're trying to go for. But man, this just does not work for me. Comedy is subjective. What some people find to be funny, other people don't. And this is another one of those instances where I know there's a lot of people who love this. They find it to be just laugh out loud hilarious. I didn't really find this film to be that funny. There were maybe a few moments where I might have chuckled, but that doesn't mean that I thought it was a good comedy because it made me laugh a few times. A good comedy needs to make you laugh more than just a handful of times throughout the entire movie. Or it has to at least have elements of it that are quality or pretty solid or great. You know, either the performances, the direction, or maybe it's got a clever script with some clever writing. Norbit isn't any of those things. It really is not. Like, it's a waste of space. That's really what Norbit is. It's a big fat waste of space. But that's just my thoughts on Norbit. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.